this lecture, I just would like to correlate between lecture 10 and lecture 9 by shedding light on some important points in order to clarify them, in order to make them easier for you to understand. Last time we talked about situated meanings. I would like you to understand that to a great extent, meanings of things are taken, are driven from the context, from the situation where we are. So, to a great extent sometimes, from the words used, I can know where you are. And if I know where you are, I'm talking about a place, situation, I can predict the dialect, the language that is going to be used by you. So, there is a relation between the situation and the words used. How I speak if I am at home, which is a situation, differs from how I might speak if I am in the corridor of my department, English department. So, the domains, Ferguson called them domains. These domains, the house, the street, the university, for example, lecture hall, meeting, these situations require different languages, different ways of speech. So, sometimes we might say, from the situation, and I can predict the language that is going to be used, the words that are going to be used. If I know the words that are used, I know where you were. This, in other words, as if I want to say, the situation mirror the words that are going to be used, or the words that are used mirror the situation where we are in. Or, to use another word, the situation reflects the words that might be used. The words that are used might reflect the situations where we were. In other words, we are talking about a reciprocal relation between the situation and the language used, the words used. Let's start. Reflexivity is derived from the word reflex. If you remember, we have reflexive pronoun. That word might, you might face in the past in that context. Reflex, mirror, tacus, in other words. When we think about how meaning is situated in actual context of use, we quickly face an important property of language. We are talking about the importance of one of the property of language, which is reflexivity, that the situation can reflect the language that is going to be used, the words that are going to be used, and the situation will require some words to be used but not the others. We quickly face an important property of language, a property G called reflexivity. This is the magical property of language. If I am at home, I will say Salaam alaikum or hi to my father in a way that differs from the way I might say the same thing if I am with people with whom I have formal relation, say at a meeting, the university, for example. We can see this property clearly by considering even so simple a dialogue as, for example, if you hear somebody saying, how are ya? How are ya? How are ya? And the answer is fine. Of course, the question, how or how are ya? And fine reflect the fact that the situation is informal. Exchanged conversation took place between colleagues who knows one another in an office corridor, in the corridor. So, as we are in the corridor, and the two people speaking are colleagues, so we are talking about a situation. We can guess what kind of words are going to be used, the way they will greet one another. The way is to be informal in such a situation. As the conversation was informal, or they address one another in this way, I can guess where are they. What is the situation? What is the situation in general? It is not only the location. No, at all. The type of the relation they might have in that place. Why do they use these words in this situation? Because they take the situation they are in to be but a brief, quickly, and mundane encounter between acquaintances. He greets him in that way, and the answer was in that way because they are acquaintances. So, from the fact that they are acquaintances, I can guess the way they are going to greet one another. And if I know the way they greet one another, I can guess the situation they are in. So, it is a reciprocal relation, علاقة تبادلية, reciprocal relation between the people. But who do they take but why do they take the situation to be thus? Why they consider the situation to be thus? In part because they are using just such words. The words used determine the situation. The situation was taken to be so because of the words used. In part because they are using just such words and related behaviors as they are. Had the exchange opened with what's your problem, in other words, the way they greet one another differs, the situation would have been construed quite differently. In other words, if the words used in order to greet one another were used in another way, I can say that the situation differs from the situation which was in the corridor. In other words, if they greet one another in this way, how are you, sir? And the answer was, I am fine. See, we're talking about something formal. In other words, the situation, the nature of the situation, the new situation, will be determined to be different because I have changed the words used to greet one another. As we saw before, we face then a chicken and egg question. In other words, which comes first, the situation or the language? In other words, the situation determines the words to be used, or the language or the words to be used or used determine what kind of situation I am in. This question reflects, notice the word reflects, an important reciprocity. Reciprocity derived from from which I derive the adjective reciprocal, okay, between language and identity. A reciprocal relation between language and reality, language and reality. Language simultaneously reflects reality, reflects the actual relation found between you and the interlocutor, the real relation between you and the people with whom you are talking. This is very much important, by the way. While reciprocity would be a good term for this property of language, the more commonly used, this relation, this word that describes the nature of language, indeed, the more commonly used term is, this is the word I want from you to know, with its definition, reflexivity. Reflexivity is the one I wanted, in the sense of language and context being like two mirrors. Reflects one another, facing each other and constantly and endlessly reflecting their own images back and forth between each other. The situation reflects what words are going to be used, the words reflect what kind of situation I am in. This term is very much important, please. Language always simultaneously reflects and constructs the situation, or context context in which it is used. I have just talked about this and I have explained it. Sorry. But what do we mean by a situation? Situations, when they involve communicative social interaction, situation and they have interaction between some people, always involve, this is important with the definitions, always involve the following connected components or aspects. These aspects are very much important. So, situations, when they involve communicative social interaction, there are some aspects that are involved by it. If I'm talking about a situation in this sense, there are some aspects that are involved, always involve this situation, involve the following aspects. This is very much important. The first aspect is semiotic aspect. The definitions are very much important. That is, this is the definition of what I mean by semiotic. The sound systems such as language, gestures, images or other symbolic systems. An activity. This is the second aspect. That is the specific social activity or activities in which the participants are engaging. In other words, these definitions are very much important. The definition orally. Political aspect, that is the distribution of social goods in the interactions such as power, status. Power, status. Sociocultural aspect, that is the personal, social and cultural knowledge, feelings, values, identities and relationships relevant in the interaction, including of course socio-cultural knowledge about science systems activities. All these aspects together constitute a system within which each of the components aspects simultaneously gives meanings to all the others and get meanings from them. That is, we have another form of reflexivity here as well. Situations are never completely novel, rather they are repeated with more or less variation over time. The most important thing I just would like you to focus on, the definitions of aspects, the reciprocal relation between language and situation, which I have called reflexivity, and I would like to thank you at the end of this lecture. Thank you so much.